Clara Lawson was looking in the mirror, fixing her simple white dress. At 28 years old, she was ready to marry the man she loved, Ethan Reynolds. Ethan was a rich tech business owner, but Clara, a kindergarten teacher, didn't care about his money. She wanted a small, sweet wedding instead of a big, fancy one like Ethan's family wanted. Clara sometimes felt out of place around Ethan's rich family and business friends, but she thought their love was strong enough to handle the differences. At the same time, across town, Ethan Reynolds was sitting in his big, fancy office, looking at the marriage papers on his desk. He was thinking hard about marrying Clara. At 32 years old, Ethan had always felt like he had to be perfect because his dad was a very important businessman. Meeting Clara made him feel happy and free, but now that their wedding day had come, he was getting nervous. His phone buzzed with a message from his dad that read, "There's still time to change your mind, son. Clara is nice, but is she really right for our family?" Ethan's hand shook as he thought about his dad's words. But then, his assistant came in and said, "Mr. Hartley, it's time to leave for the wedding." With a big sigh, Ethan stood up and got ready to go. Little did he know that what he decided to do that day would change his life and Clara's life forever. In a small office across the city, Dr. Sofia Martinez, a kind doctor who helped people have babies, looked at Clara's file. She knew Clara wanted to become a mom and had been trying to help her. Dr. Rodriguez smiled, thinking of how excited Clara had been during their last meeting. "Today's the big day," she said to herself, hoping everything would go well for Clara. Back at the small chapel, guests sat on wooden benches, waiting for the wedding to start. Clara's friends from her kindergarten class were there, as were some of Ethan's business friends. Clara's best friend and maid of honor, Maya, peeked out from a side room to see if Ethan had arrived. She looked at Clara and said, "Still no sign of Ethan." Clara felt a little worried but told herself he was probably just running late. As time went on, people in the chapel started whispering to each other, wondering where the groom was. Clara's parents looked worried, and Ethan's mom sat very still, not showing any expression on her face. Suddenly, the chapel doors flew open. Everyone turned, expecting to see Ethan, but instead it was his assistant, looking out of breath and nervous. He walked up to Clara and handed her an envelope. Clara opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a note from Ethan that said, "Clara, I'm sorry, but I can't go through with this. Please forgive me. Ethan." The room filled with gasps, and Clara felt her heart break as she read the words again and again. Maya ran to hold her up as Clara whispered, "He's not coming. He left me." Clara's parents quickly hugged her, while Ethan's mom quietly left the chapel, looking embarrassed. Clara felt pain, sadness, and embarrassment, but she also felt a spark of anger. She stood up, took a deep breath, and said to everyone, "I'm sorry, but there won't be a wedding today." She then walked out of the chapel with her parents and Maya, feeling sad but strong. She saw her reflection in a window, a bride without a groom. Days later, Clara was alone in her apartment. She ignored her buzzing phone as people tried to reach her about the canceled wedding. Ethan didn't call, but his family's lawyer sent a message asking for gifts back and saying they wanted her to help pay for any wedding costs. A week after the wedding that never happened, Clara sat in Dr. Rodriguez's office. She had put away her wedding dress, and the engagement ring was returned to Ethan's family. Dr. Rodriguez looked at her kindly and said, "Given what happened, do you want to wait on trying to have a baby? We can pause until you're ready." Clara thought for a minute and then, surprising herself, shook her head. "No," she said. "I've always wanted to be a mom. I thought I'd do it with someone, but plans change. I still want to go through with it." Dr. Rodriguez smiled and said, "Okay." As Clara left the office that day, she felt a new sense of purpose. Ethan might have taken away her wedding dream, but he couldn't take away her dream of becoming a mother. She felt excited about this new path in life, even though she didn't know that her choice would one day bring her back face to face with Ethan in ways she couldn't imagine. 4 years flew by, and Clara's life was full of surprises. Her small apartment was now filled with the laughter and noise of her quadruplets. 2 boys and 2 girls, all with Clara's warm brown eyes and playful smiles. The baby plan had worked even better than expected. Dr. Rodriguez told her she was going to have 4 babies, which was a huge shock. But now, she couldn't imagine life without them. One sunny morning, Clara took her 4 little ones to the park for ice cream. She laughed as she wiped sticky hands and watched her kids play. She didn't see Ethan jogging nearby, following his usual workout routine. Ethan was now 36 and still kept up with his exercises. He was running when he heard laughter and saw a group of kids around a woman. Something about her seemed familiar. As he got closer, he realized it was Clara. He felt his heart skip as he watched her with the kids. Ethan stood there, unsure of what to do. He wondered if those kids were hers, but they looked just like her, so he figured they must be. Before he could decide whether to go up to her or walk away, one of Clara's little boys pointed at him and shouted, "Mommy, look!" Clara turned and froze when she saw Ethan. Her ice cream fell to the ground as she whispered, "Ethan." They looked at each other, neither saying a word. After a moment, Clara gathered her kids and said, "Come on, sweethearts, it's time to go." She walked away, her kids following, while Ethan stood there stunned. He watched her go, thinking about how her kids looked just like her. Then he thought about the timing and wondered, could those children be his? As he stood there, a feeling of curiosity and uncertainty grew inside him. He knew this wasn't the last time he'd see Clara. Once, there was a woman named Clara who was very excited to marry her fiancé, Ethan. She wanted to have children, so she planned to go through a process called IVF, which is a way to help people have babies when they need extra help. But just before the wedding, Ethan got scared and left Clara. This made Clara very sad, but she decided to go through with the IVF by herself and ended up having 4 babies, quadruplets. Years later, Clara was walking in a park with her 4 kids when she suddenly ran into Ethan. Ethan was surprised to see Clara with her children, and he thought they looked like him. He started to wonder if they could be his children too. These thoughts kept Ethan up at night until he decided he needed to know the truth. He called his lawyer, Frank, and asked him to help find out if he was the father of Clara's kids. So Ethan asked the court for a paternity test, which is a test that can show if someone is really the parent of a child. When Clara got the papers saying Ethan wanted a test, she felt really angry. "He left me at the altar and now he wants to be part of my kids' lives?" she complained to her friend Maya. But Clara's friends supported her and promised to help. She even called her doctor, Sofia Martinez, who knew about the IVF and said she would help Clara with the documents that could prove she was the mother. As the court date got closer, the news about Clara, Ethan, and their 4 children spread everywhere. People on TV and in magazines began talking about it, and everyone had opinions. Some people thought Ethan had the right to know if he was the father, while others thought he was being mean to Clara by suddenly showing up in her life again. Even Ethan's work started to suffer, because people were mad at him for how he was treating Clara. As for Clara, the attention was hard for her, and it was hard on her children too. People kept showing up to take pictures and ask questions. But Clara stayed strong, knowing that she loved her children very much and wanted to protect them. Ethan, alone in his fancy apartment, felt both nervous and excited. Part of him hoped he was the father, but he was also scared because being a dad to 4 kids was a big responsibility. He also started to feel regret for leaving Clara years ago. When the day of the court hearing finally arrived, both Ethan and Clara felt nervous and scared. They both knew their lives would change forever based on what the judge would say. Clara looked at her sleeping children, feeling a mix of love and worry. Ethan, alone in his apartment, thought about the past and wondered if this was his chance to make things right. But there was more happening than just Clara and Ethan's story. Dr. Sofia and her friend, a lawyer named Rachel Lee, were very worried that Ethan's case could hurt other families who had children through IVF. They thought that if Ethan won, It might make things harder for other people who use technology to have kids. So they gathered people and organizations who believed in the right to become a parent through science, like IVF, to help Clara in court. At the same time, some people supported Ethan, believing that children should know who their biological parents are. One leader, Pastor Mark Thompson, even started a campaign on TV to support Ethan's right as a father. This added even more drama and pressure to the case. With both sides getting ready for court, Clara and Ethan felt like they were in the middle of a storm. Clara's kids didn't understand everything, but one evening, her youngest child asked her, "Mommy, what's a daddy? Do we have one?" Clara felt sad, knowing she would have to explain everything one day, but she wanted to wait until they were older. While Clara worried about protecting her children, Ethan began to feel something surprising, a connection to the kids. Even though he had left Clara long ago, the more he thought about the children, the more he wondered if he could be a father to them. He wasn't sure if he was doing this for them or to make himself feel better. When the day of the hearing finally came, everyone involved was nervous. Dr. Sophia, Rachel, Pastor Holloway, and others who had joined the case knew that what happened in court would affect not only Clara and Ethan, but also many other families who had children with IVF. The media was filled with discussions, and social media trended with messages like, "Stand with Clara," and "Fathers' rights matter," showing how divided people felt. In the middle of all this, Clara and Ethan found themselves spending more time together. Even though they were fighting in court, their lives were tangled up again. They both knew that this battle was about more than just winning or losing. It was about love, family, and trying to make things right, not just for themselves, but for their children's future. After years of not seeing each other, Clara and Ethan had to meet face to face for the first time outside of court. They were sitting across from each other in a small room, both feeling nervous and not looking directly at each other. Before they could start talking, the mediator, a person who helps people solve problems, asked them to share what they hope to achieve. Clara spoke first. She said, "I want to protect my children. They mean everything to me, and I don't want them to get hurt or have their lives messed up." Ethan nodded, took a deep breath, and then said, "I want to know my children too, if they are really mine. I want a chance to be a father to them." As they kept talking, both Clara and Ethan started to open up. Clara talked about the joys and struggles of raising 4 kids all by herself, and Ethan shared his regrets about leaving Clara and how he had been scared of committing to a family. By the end of the meeting, although they hadn't solved everything, something was different between them. They started to remember the people they had once been, people who had once loved each other. In the weeks that followed, as they waited for the next court date, Clara and Ethan began to talk more often, mostly about things related to the case. Slowly, their conversations also started to include updates about the kids. One day, Clara sent Ethan a photo of the kids at their preschool art show. She texted him, "Thought you might like to see this." And Ethan felt a warm feeling in his heart as he looked at the smiling faces of the children who might be his. He replied, "Thank you. They're beautiful, and you've done an amazing job with them." After that, Clara sent more updates about the kids, like funny stories and important milestones in their lives. Ethan, in turn, asked more questions about their personalities and what they liked. As they got to know more about each other's lives, old feelings started to come back, though they were mixed with the pain of the past. Then, one day, one of the quadruplets, little Emma, got very sick with a bad flu. Clara was tired from taking care of her and mentioned it to Ethan in a phone call. Ethan immediately offered to help. He called a special doctor and brought supplies and food to the hospital for Clara. They sat together in the waiting room, both very tired and worried. Ethan gently reached out and held Clara's hand, saying, "I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving you, for not being there, and for all this legal mess." Clara looked at him, tears filling her eyes. "Ethan, But before she could finish, the doctor came out with news about Emma. In that moment, they were no longer opponents, but two people deeply worried about a child they both cared for. This experience brought them closer. Even though the legal case wasn't over, Clara and Ethan began to think that maybe they could find a solution outside of court, one that would let both of them be part of the kids' lives. They wondered if they could become co-parents and work together for the best interests of their children. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. Reporters and people from the public filled the courthouse steps, everyone talking about Clara and Ethan's case. Inside the courtroom, both Clara and Ethan looked tense as the judge entered, and everyone got quiet. The lawyers started with their opening statements. Ethan's lawyer talked about how important it is for a father to know his children, while Clara's team focused on how much she had cared for the children all these years and how breaking their family apart could hurt them. They even had expert witnesses, like a doctor who talked about how the children were created through a special process called IVF, and a pastor who spoke about traditional family values. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he surprised everyone. "Your Honor," he began, his voice full of emotion. "I came here thinking I knew what I wanted, but now I see I was wrong. Clara has been an amazing mother to these children, giving them everything I couldn't. I thought I wanted custody, but what I really want is a chance to know them and be a part of their lives." The judge called a break to let Clara and Ethan talk privately. In a quiet room, Clara looked at Ethan and asked, "Did you mean what you said?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, every word." "I don't want to fight anymore, Clara. I want to find a way to work together, for the kids." When they went back to the courtroom, their lawyers shared a new agreement with the judge. It said that Clara would keep primary custody, but Ethan could visit and be part of the children's lives. The judge looked at them and asked, "Are you sure this is what you want?" They both nodded, and the judge approved their agreement. As they left the courtroom, Clara and Ethan felt a sense of relief. They had come to court as enemies but were leaving as partners, working together to raise their children. Over the next few weeks, they started putting their plan into action. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension and awkwardness. But they decided to start small, with Ethan visiting the kids at Clara's home. The first visit was a bit uncomfortable. Ethan felt like an outsider, and the children were curious but unsure. Clara gently said, "Kids, this is Mr. Ethan. He's going to be spending some time with us." Ethan knelt down and said softly, "Hello. It's very nice to meet you all." The kids gave shy smiles, and some hid behind Clara. But little Emma, the bravest, stepped forward and asked, "Do you like to play with blocks?" Ethan's face lit up with joy as he said, "I love blocks. Should we build something together?" Soon, he and Emma started to make a big tower, and as they worked, other kids slowly came over, curious to join them. Clara, watching from the kitchen, felt a mix of happiness and sadness. She was glad to see Ethan playing with the children, but it reminded her of a life she had once dreamed of, before Ethan had left her at the altar. As the months passed, Ethan visited more often, and the visits became easier. He learned about the children's routines, what they liked and didn't like, and he got to know their unique personalities. Emma was brave and liked to lead, Michael was thoughtful and quiet, Sophie was very creative, and Daniel was always making peace between others. Clara, raising quadruplets alone, was thankful for Ethan's help, but also afraid. She worried that the kids might like Ethan more than her, and she feared he might leave again and break their hearts, just like he had broken hers. One evening, after a happy visit when all the kids had begged Ethan to stay, Clara found herself crying. Her friend Maya, who had come to support her, hugged her tightly. "Liv, this must be so hard for you," she said. Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. "It is. I'm glad they're bonding with him, but I'm scared they might choose him over me or that he'll leave again." Maya suggested that Clara should talk to Ethan about her feelings. So, next time Ethan came over, after the kids were in bed, Clara asked him to sit and talk. She shared her fears of being replaced, of him leaving, and of the kids getting hurt. She cried, letting out years of hidden feelings. Ethan listened carefully, his own eyes filling with tears. When she was done, he reached across the table and held her hand. "Clara," he said, "I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry, but I promise I'm not leaving. These kids, our kids, mean everything to me, and you're an amazing mother. I would never want to replace you. I just want to be part of this family, however you'll let me." His words were so honest and kind that Clara started to believe they could make things work. After that night, they began to work together to raise their children. They had regular talks about the kids, sharing not just schedules, but also their dreams and worries. Ethan kept his promise, rearranging his job to be there for school events, doctor visits, and family outings. He even took classes to become a better dad. Clara started inviting him to join in family traditions, and she showed him photos and videos of the kids when they were younger. As the months went by, they found a balance that worked for them. The children, noticing how nicely their parents got along, felt happy and safe. The kids loved having both Clara and Ethan in their lives, and they no longer felt they had to pick one parent over the other. A year later, they celebrated the children's 5th birthday. Watching the kids play together, Clara said, "We're doing okay, aren't we?" Ethan smiled and replied, "Better than okay." "These kids are amazing, Clara, and that's all because of you." Clara shook her head, smiling. "Not just me. Not anymore. They need both of us." At that moment, Emma ran up to them, her face covered in cake. "Mommy, Daddy, come play with us," she shouted. Ethan froze, surprised, because it was the first time any of the children had called him Daddy. He looked at Clara, unsure of what to do. But Clara, with tears in her eyes, nodded and said, "Well, you heard her. Let's go play." They joined in the party games, and both felt happier than they had in a long time. From that day on, they started talking about the future more. They both realized that their current setup was good, but could be better. "I've been thinking," Ethan said one evening after the kids were asleep. "What if I moved closer? Not here, of course, but maybe a house nearby so I could be more involved without disrupting the routines you have set." Clara thought about it. Having Ethan close by would be both comforting and scary, but she nodded and said, "That could work, but if we do this, you have to be all in. The kids can't handle you disappearing again." Ethan took her hand. "Clara, leaving you at the altar was the biggest mistake I ever made. I won't do that again. I'm here for good, for you and our children." Ethan found a house a few blocks away and worked hard to make it feel like home for the kids. Clara helped by sharing the children's favorite things. The children began to spend nights at Ethan's place and loved it. Both parents had dinners together, and things felt natural. Over time, they both grew in their personal lives too. Inspired by their journey, Clara started writing a book about being a single mom to quadruplets. Ethan, realizing the importance of family, started delegating more work so he could spend more time at home. Their story, once only talked about in gossip magazines, became inspiring to others. They were even invited to speak at events about modern families and co-parenting. They continued putting their children first. Their painful memories of the past weren't forgotten, but they were now less important than the joy of seeing their kids grow. Their relationship, once filled with conflict, became supportive and kind. The quadruplets, sensing their parents' happiness, began to thrive even more. Emma was now a little athlete, Michael loved math, Sophie was a budding artist, and Daniel had a gift for bringing people together. One lazy Sunday, the family had a picnic in the same park where Ethan had first seen Clara with the children. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't seen us that day?" Clara asked. Ethan thought for a moment and replied, "Sometimes, but when I look at our family, I'm just glad I did." Clara nodded. "It's funny how something that felt so awful can lead to something beautiful," she said. Their thoughts were interrupted by the kids, who wanted them to join their game. Laughing, they ran over, feeling thankful for their journey. They continued to grow and learn as parents, becoming closer and stronger. Their past mistakes became lessons, and their fears turned into strength. They weren't a typical family, but they had something special and strong. The children were surrounded by love and happiness, and they knew their parents would always be there for them. As the quadruplets' 10th birthday came, Clara and Ethan couldn't believe how far they had come. They threw a big party, inviting friends, family, and even some of the lawyers and doctors who had been part of their journey. During a quiet moment, Ethan said, "I think I finally know what real love is. It's not about perfect moments. It's about choosing each other every day, through the good and the bad." Clara nodded and leaned in close. "And it's about forgiveness and growing together, not apart." Their words held the meaning of their journey. Forgiveness, love, and strength had brought them to where they were now. As they rejoined the party, they felt happy and complete. Their story, though hard at times, had brought them a family full of love, forgiveness, and second chances. The kids, who didn't know the full story of their parents' journey, simply enjoyed the love that surrounded them. Clara and Ethan knew that their unconventional family was strong and filled with a love that would last forever. If you enjoyed this story and would like to see more content like it, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on all our latest, inspiring and heartwarming stories and have the opportunity to engage with our growing community. Additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts and feedback in the comments section below. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to sharing more captivating narratives with you.